Segas o luego de Longhouse. Kawennehente Toni Cook, Wasjana, Wasleago, Ahkwesasne Ahkwesasne I just introduced myself in my native language, well, one of my native languages. My name is Kawennehente. It means first bring the word. I'm of the Snipe Clan, of the Onondaga people, but I speak Mohawk, only because of where I live. I'm from Ahkwesasne, so we're a long way from home. And I work at the Ahkwesasne Freedom School, that's the emblem on here in the background. I team teach with my younger brother. His name is Rassias. We currently teach level 2-3, and I've been team teaching pretty much most of my teaching career. I have 2 kids. My daughter Iakokariio is with me today. Her name is Iakokariio, which means she has a nice story. And I have a son, he's 2.5. He's at home with his father, and his name is Mohawk, which means to melt the snow. He's beginning to speak, and I speak our language. I just wanted to take the time also to thank ILI for making it possible for us to come out here, because if they didn't sponsor us, we wouldn't be here presenting for you. So now we will be presenting on getting kids to speak their native language. I use some techniques called gesturing, pictographs, word prompting, and team teaching. These are all the best work for me. This is a picture of the little school place that we teach at. It's called the Ahkwesasne Freedom School, and in Mohawk we call it Ahkwesasne which literally translates into Ahkwesasne Freedom School. The school was founded in 1979, and it is and was and still is a grassroots parent-run school. It became full Mohawk immersion in 1985. The school has existed for nearly 33 years, and it has survived on a shoestring budget. We have a really extremely tight budget, but we managed to get by. In order to maintain its sovereignty, the school does not seek federal or governmental assistance. So that's why we are such a shoestring budget, is because we raise the money that we want so that we can teach what we want. So that's the idea behind our school. The school is not restricted by federal and state guidelines, so it is able to teach traditional teachings and make all lessons cross-curricular according to our traditional and ceremonial calendar. The school is currently in its 7th year of having returning alumni students as full Mohawk immersion teachers, so we're very proud of that, because that was one of our goals way back when the school started. Was we wanted to create students who spoke and who would sometime in the future come back and teach. So now we are in our 7th year of that, and we're very proud. Our student numbers vary from year to year. Some years were low, some years were high, some years were in the middle. I think our lowest recorded student number was in the high 40s, and our highest student enrollment was anywhere from the 80s to the 85s. That's what, as much as we can house. Any more than that, I think we do need a bigger school. This is my AFS journey. I had to write it out down so I don't forget it, so bear with me while I read it to you. Speakers. I have 5 generations of speaker on both sides of my family, so I'm very fortunate that on my mother's side and my father's side, we did not lose the language. My great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and I speak on my mother's side. On my father's side, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my father, and now I speak. And our 5th generation, it was my children, so now they're speakers, so we're very proud of that too, that we're working so hard. On both sides of my family, they all went to residential schools, and even though they did go to residential schools, they didn't completely lose their language. So we're still continuing. My children, on their father's side of the family, they were affected on both sides. They have lost the language on his mother's side. It skipped 2 generations, so her great-grandparents speak, but her grandparents and her father do not. They have no language whatsoever. And then on his father's side, as far as I know, none of them speak on his father's side of the family. So she's actually, her and her brother have actually revived language in their family, so we're proud of that also. Language loss. Yeah, 2 generation language loss in the family. Language revitalization. Language has restarted with the great-grandchildren, my children, has not been lost on my side of the family, was almost completely gone on their side, on her father's side of the family. AFS. Both of my parents taught AFS in 1986 to the early 90s. Both had the language but did not pass it on to their children. My father's first 3 children did not receive the language from him or his ex-wife. And on my mother's side, her first child, my eldest brother, did not receive his language either. And then when my mother and father got together and they had my sister and I, they didn't give us the language either. So I'm technically a second language learner if you really get down to the nitty-gritty. But when they had my brother, they decided, well, after 7 children, how about we try for 1 speaker? So it was my dad's only boy too, so what they did was they focused all their time into teaching him the language. And just right from birth, they just spoke to him and spoke to him because they said, well, out of 7 kids, we hope we get 1. So what they didn't realize is that because my sister and I were still young, we were 3 and 4, that we were picking up the language along with him. And we had gone to a 50-50 public school. So we'd get, like, in the morning, we'd get half of the morning Mohawk, and then the rest of the day would be English. And then we'd come home. And my parents began to realize that my sister and I were coming home and we were using words, short sentences. So that's when they realized, okay, something's happening now. We really have to start pushing with all 3 of them. So they started speaking, and luckily now, out of 7 children, they have 3 speakers. So not bad, almost half. Today, my family ended up with 3 of the 7 children as functionally fluent to fluent. So some days it varies. I think I'm really fluent, and I talk to somebody, and I'm like, oh, I'm not. Or some days I can just ramble on, and other people are scared because of how much I speak. So it really just depends on who I'm speaking to. And now, since we all have children, there are 17 grandchildren between my parents, and 7 of the 17 grandchildren are all speakers now. So my 2 children speak, my sister's 2 sons speak, and my sister's 3 have gone to the Freedom School since pre-K, and they are pretty fluent. They can keep a conversation with you. And AFS has been a part of my family, has been an important and influential part of my family's language revitalization and the continuation. Here's a picture of my level 2-3 right now. It's a mixed grade. This group has been in a team teaching classroom for 2.5 years now. They have been taught using gesturing, hand signals, pictographs, images, word counting, and team teaching. So currently, she has been in team teaching for 2.5 years. I began using these types of methods in 2005. That's when I began teaching, was in 2005, and I kind of got thrown into the classroom. I walked in, there were all white walls, there was lots of stuff, and they were like, okay, have fun, teach. And I was like, okay, well, let me figure out what I need to do. So I started off small with just, I said, well, they don't know me, I don't know them, so I'm going to introduce myself to the kids. So that was the basis of our first half of learning. Was we decided to learn how to introduce ourselves, because traditionally you need to know how to introduce yourself so that you know who you are and you're proud of who you are. So that's what we started with. I have taught level 2, level 2-3, level 1-2, level 3-4, and level 2-3 again. So most of my years of teaching, I have been in a team teaching room, and that personally, that's what works best for me. This is my 8th year at the school, but my 6th year teaching. I took a year off when I had my daughter, and I took a year off with my son to spend time with them at home and to make sure that they start off with the language also. I've had the most success with team teaching. Gesturing, hand signals, pictographs, images, and word prompting only enhance my team teaching. I've been very fortunate to 2.5 years I worked with my sister, and about a year and a half I've been working with my brother. So we grew up speaking the language together, and now we're teaching the language together. So the way that we learned it, we're now teaching it. So it's making it easier for the children to pick it up because it came so naturally to us, so now we're able to naturally give it to them just in the conversation format. Gesturing hand signals. Basically, it's any hand movement or hand signal that is used to help students understand the word in the language. Okay, I'm going to try something here. This work? Okay, I'll give you, we have Onondaga Nation, it's our opening address. And this is one of the techniques I use with my students to help them just remember and retain what I'm trying to get them to understand. So what I'm going to do with her is I'm going to do the hand signals, and she can recite most of what I'm going to be showing her. Okay, so she chose the stars, so she wants to show you how she gives thanks to the stars. Okay, so all I did was any word that, like abuego, I go like this because that's everybody. Aska is I use one. It's like we all bring our minds together. So the only gesture I could do was to bring our hands together. So I said and then what I was our mind, so I pointed out my brain. And then this one varies, it depends on the teacher. You can either wave at them or you can give the handshaking because you're acknowledging them in some way. So that's how we say the guanaholados. Another one, we're going to try the sun. This one's has a little bit more to do. She's so good. Okay, so we did the sun, and all we did was Gisego, so we did Gisego. Tehosatego, so he brightens the earth, so I use this because when it's bright out, you go like this. So he heats up the earth also, so all we did was we went like this, he heats up the earth. So here on the earth. And then Rassias, he gives us power. It's the only thing I can think of for power. So it's like he gives us power. And then Toni is basically when we end, so we say Toni Ngwa. So now we end our minds because we're done. So that's one way to use gesturing. So all you would do is in your own language, if whatever word you're using, just figure out a signal that goes with it. And what I realized was when we do the opening every day in the morning and in the afternoon. And what I was realizing was the students were like reciting the opening, but they were heavily relying on teachers to help them. So I always give this example to my students. I'm like, I do not like to sit there and go. I'm like, that is so annoying. I'm like, because my mom knows I can do the opening, but your mom doesn't know you can. So your mom needs to see you doing it. So when I started using the gesturing, the hallway is silent now when you do the opening. All you see is teachers' hands just waving away, but the kids know what they need to say. And some of them have gotten so used to the gesturing that they just totally just ramble on what they need to say without any help. And it's getting so well that some of our first graders, they're only 5, some of them are now 6. They're almost completely able to recite the opening by themselves because we've used the gesturing so much with them. So now their own little 5-year-olds are almost able to do the entire opening on their own because we've given them a tool to use to help learn it. Pictographic images. Any image or picture that is drawn in place of a word to help students understand the meaning of a particular word can be used in place of writing at first. Writing can be added later on. So if I were to do the thing with the sun, if I were to draw out the opening for the sun, all I would do is Gisego, so I would write G, and then Sego, I would just draw a hand waving, and then the Hoswatego, so I would draw the sun with sunglasses on because he's brightening up the day, and then look, the next image would be a sun and he's sweating because it's so hot. Then gone to Onondaga, so I would put an arrow down and I would draw just the earth, and then that's what's done, so I would draw a muscle man standing there going like this, and then this as well, the sun would have 2 hands and he's going like this, and there would be a person reaching up like this, and then you would point an arrow down so he's giving you it. So that's another way that gesturing and images help the students to understand the words that are more difficult for you to get them to understand. So all you do is you give them an image and a gesture, and they're already internalizing what you need them to know without relying on it being written out, or you writing it, or them writing it. Word prompting is the act of giving the students the beginning section of a word to encourage them to continue speaking the language without resorting to English. So this one, I give students the beginning section of a word. If they are trying to say, for example, I like to, the word would be Kawennehente. And in our language, I'm not quite sure how many conjugations there are, but at my level, we focus on 5. So it's the my, your, his, her, and it. So if I wanted them to learn that one word, Ahkwesasne, and I wanted them to change it 5 ways, I would have to be able to tell her, like if she was trying to tell somebody, if she was trying to tell me a story about a friend, and her friend was a female, but then she would use the male version, I would have to remind her to add in the female. So sometimes what happens is, okay. So that's all I do is, rather than like yelling at them, like, oh, I didn't say it right, I'll just try to really nonchalantly just change the beginning part of the word for them, because they know the ending, they know what they're trying to say. It's just sometimes they get mixed up with the beginning. So I'll just give them the beginning part of a word, and then they're able to change it every way they need to. And usually it stops them from switching to English, because a big pet peeve of mine is when they're so into telling you a story and they throw all this English into it, and you're like, oh, gee, we just worked so hard to keep you in the language, and now we're throwing English in there. So by doing word prompting, I'm still technically helping them, but I'm not fully rewording the story for them. I'm just giving them little bits that will help them along to continue to tell their story the way they need to and in our language. Team teachers. 2 teachers who work together by constantly role modeling how the language should be spoken naturally. They must be able to work off of one another, not just in the same room. So that's a big part of it. The only reason I've been able to work with my team teachers is because they're my sister and my brother. So that's why I've had the most success. I had one year where I taught with a fellow teacher, and it was weird at first, but then once we got used to each other, we were really good at it. But that first little phase of working together, we were like, oh, how does this work? So 2 teachers who work well works even better when these 2 teachers are able to work off of one another and are able to take over if the other teacher happens to stop for some reason. So an example example I would give is my sister and I were teaching together, and it was my turn to do calendar. Like we switch off daily, who's gonna do what. So we were doing calendar, and I'm standing up there and I'm asking them like, oh, what's the year, what's the month, what's the date? And then somebody walked in and they needed to talk to me. And I didn't even think about it, I just took off and I went to talk to whoever came in. And without even thinking, my sister jumped up and she continued, okay, what's the season, what's the weather? And she kept going. And the kids didn't think nothing of it, they were just like, oh, we're going to continue our calendar. And then the person who was talking was like, oh, I apologize, I didn't mean to take you away from your class. And I go, well, that's why I have a team teacher, that's why we work together. Because if I need to be gone, she's right there. She knows everything we do together. So it just comes naturally and the kids don't think anything of it. This is where your routine will also be a key. If your routine is strong, then your team teachers will work well together. If you know what is next and what needs to be done, then your teacher will have no problem just jumping in and taking over whenever they need to. The next slide is 4 areas of language. So we do recitation, introduction, announcing, and conversation. I most commonly use gesturing, pictographs, and word prompting while I'm teaching using these 4 areas of language. So our first one is recitation. So I gave the example of our Onondaga, that's our opening address, and our closing address, that's our words that come before all else. The picture on the left, the longer picture, we have 18 to 19 elements that we give thanks to on a daily basis. And we start at the people, then we go to the waters, the fish, the fruit, the grasses, the medicines, the vegetables, the animals, the trees, the birds, the thunders, the 4 winds, the sun, the moon, the stars, the 4 beings, and then the creator. Some people throw the bugs in there, but it just depends on whether or not you want them in there. You don't need them, but it just depends on how you feel. So we have these elements that we give thanks to. And this is an example of recitation. They do it every day, so they're reciting it daily, twice a day. So this is when I would use gesturing and hand signals the most, because I want them to say what I need them to say, but I don't want to constantly be like bobbing down helping them, because nobody's there to see me do it, they're there to see them do it. I'm just the teacher, they're the product, so they need to be doing the opening on their own. Pictograph images also are used with it. That little strip of lined paper, the people with the circle around it, that's our Ahkwesasne. Aska, Andiluwa Nuni, Ne, Wanibula, Tanok Dave Mohawk, so giving thanks. Then we're Ahkwesasne, so again, people, Skana, so our image for peace is just a vase with a line going through it, because if you're at peace, your mind is level. Angahage, Ne, Ganto, Onondaga Nation means we're all here together on earth. So we drew a picture of people together holding hands because they're all here on earth together. I have a video, I hope it'll work. I have just another example of 2 little girls doing the one part of the they just gave thanks to the waters, and all we did was when we give thanks to the waters, we give thanks to the different bodies of water. So Goa is like the ocean, so we go Goa. That's more like a water that's up under the wind. It's like small bodies of water. And then the water that runs underground. So when we speak Mohawk, it sounds backwards. I'm saying it in English, and when I'm understanding it, the language is different. But means underground water. So when they say underground, then water flowing. And the water helps us to quench our thirst. So that's why she did the cup that she was drinking. And then it also erases anything on earth that is bad. So that's why she said it wipes away everything, and then bad, they just burn. And then, but these are the two ways that I've been using for the past 5 years to help get my students to do it on their own, because I don't want them relying on me all the time. Introduction, so I'm trying to get rid of her introduction. I don't know if she will. Which means how many winters I have seen. So the one way that I can get the students to understand their age is by showing them snowflakes. So I said, when you see a 6 or 6 snowflakes, that's how many winters you've seen here on this earth. So that's how you know how old you are. And then their clan, the Mohawks of Ahkwesasne only have 3 clans. They have the bear, the wolf, and the turtle. That's why we speak Mohawk, but we're Onondaga. We're a different nation, but we speak Mohawk, but we still acknowledge that that's our clan, even though we live in Ahkwesasne. And then at the top, there's the face with the eyes and the hair. So they have to learn how to tell you their hair color and their eye color. And they have to also be able to tell you if they have dark hair or light hair, or dark eyes or light eyes. So one color has to get changed 3 different ways in order for it to be used. So that's one way that we do that. They even go as far as to tell you their height and their weight, their shoe size, their favorite hobby, their favorite food, their favorite drink, their favorite color. They will do their entire family. They'll tell you all the clans of their family. They're able to tell you their date of birth, the day they were born, the year they were born, and the season they were born. So what you do with introduction is you start out really small. Basically, you're like, okay, I want them to know their name, age, clan, nation, school, and their level. That's all I want to start with. And then when they get used to that, you just add on. You're like, okay, now I want them to do their favorites, or I want them to do their personal, like height, eye color, things like that, just their characteristics of them. And then you can even add in their address and their phone number. That way, they'll memorize it because they need to know it. they have to do their family, and when they do their family, they do themselves, their parents, if they have any siblings, and then they split. They do their mother's side of the family and their father's side of the family. And then they have to be able to tell you who their grandparents are. So they have to be able to say, on my father's side, my grandmother is, or on my father's side, my grandfather is. And then when they get good at that, they have to be able to tell you the clans. And that's where our clans come into play, and they play a key point is because we're taught right from a young age that you're never supposed to marry your same clan. So that's one way of helping the kids to understand that. So if they're seeing that the clans are proper on their paper, then they're like, okay, I'm doing it right. But if it's not, then we just remind them, okay, well, somewhere down the line they didn't do it the right way, but now that you know, you need to do it this way. So we're forcing a lot of traditional thinking while we're doing something fun. And I think the longest introduction I've ever done has been 30 points. So a child will have to stand up and tell you 30 individual things about themselves. And then that even helps. So like if you get one student who's like, I know it's easy, I can do everything. Then you go, okay, smart pants, I want to introduce a fellow classmate. And it has to be a female. So then they get up and they're like, oh, okay. So now they have to listen to other people and they have to do the female version of all the words. And then when they get really good at that, you go, okay, now I want you to do you, her, and we'll pick a boy now. So now they have to learn themselves, a girl, and a boy. And right after that, you taught them the you, so they already know the you down pat. And then when they get really, really good at it, then you ask them, okay, here's a stuffed animal. Tell me some things about this stuffed animal. What does he like? What does he do? Where does he live? Like, so that you get the it format of a word. So with that one small introduction, you're able to expand on this big unit, and they're able to get so many different versions of the language just from that one introduction. Our next one, announcing. We do this for socials and at ceremonies, and I use pictograph images. So announcing that something is going to happen. So over here, it's the long rectangular image, and Gongyokwa, that is the people. So that's why the 4 people on there. So wadahusiyo, so you need to listen up. So it's a hand in the ear. Onagadi, there's really no way to tell them onagadi, it's just, it is time. So onagadi agahiwe, it is now time, so we have a clock. Ne, and then it's blank because they have to know who's announcing. So if it's a fellow student, they would just insert the name, and then if it's a male, they would say the male version, if it's a female, they have to say the female version. And then they're now gonna sing. So that's somebody singing with a drum and a rattle, and then they also have to tell you what dance they're going to be singing. So that's why that part is blank, is because you would add the dance in there. And then I don't ease it. So now the little man is pointing at the people. So he's telling the other students, now you are going to help the singer who sing also. And then the other version is just more of a traditional one. And it's just basically, so the housekeeper has given me the assignment of appointing to announce for you that the rabbit dance will be sung at this time. And that's one way that we do announcing. And then right here we have a video of one of the students reciting it. Oh. All we did there was we used that very basic format with images instead in place of words, and they're able now to announce for anything that's going to happen. And if your images are pretty well set, then basically you can put almost any combination of images up there, and your students will know what they need to say based on what the image means. Our next one is conversation and dialogue. So these are 2-person modules. Daily dialogue that promotes conversation, so it's question and answer between students. So my daughter and her fellow classmate are doing the bathroom routine, and all they're asking is, where are you going? I'm going to the bathroom. Why are you going to the bathroom? Because I have to wash my hands. Why are you going to wash your hands? Because my hands are dirty. Are you going to eat snack or lunch? Yes, I'm going to eat snack or lunch. Why are you going to eat snack or lunch? Because I'm hungry and it is now time to eat snack or lunch. So you're giving them a way to converse with each other in a really simple format. And this goes so far that I ask them, they ask each other, they ask a male, they ask a female, they ask a group of females, they ask a group of males, I ask them together as a whole. I ask just by pointing at somebody. So I ask them in groups of twos, because all our language changes depending on the number of people. So just by doing this one routine, I'm able to get like, I think it's 10 conjugations out of one routine, and they're able to properly tell me who's going to the bathroom and why. Can be used to promote dialogue for anything. So stories, recess, anything you're going to do, you can create a small little dialogue, and you can grow, you can expand on it. So now I'll show the video of them. Okay, that's just an example of them doing a dialogue. All these videos I did, I basically tell the students, I'm coming to Santa Fe, and I need to present about things we do in the classroom. So do I have any volunteers or kids who want to do videos for me? And they all jumped up. The little boy in this, he is so shy and he is so quiet that when he talks to you, if you're not right beside his ear, you don't know what he's saying. Like his lips move when he talks, but his language is proper. So that's one hurdle that we have to get over is volume. So I apologize if the videos aren't as loud, but during the networking session, I can try to replay them and hopefully they're lower. Speaking, so this is all forms of language. I use word prompting, pictographs, and traditional language images. If you choose a traditional pictograph image, keep it the same for all the speeches in the future. So don't randomly change on your student, because if you're trying to get them in the habit of creating their own speeches, then they need kind of like a bank of images and words that they need to use. So over here, we did a speech for the reed beans or string beans. So the Longhouse is the two hands shaking, and then the Ohotsiri, reed beans, G-Sego, that's one of like, because you are, Zawayote, so the reed beans and the people are working together, so you're helping us. Nedosa, to not become hungry, and that's just a plus sign, G-Sego, and because you're still working, so that reed beans got a suit and a hat and paper in his hand because he's going to work. And so you're still working to do the job that the Creator has assigned you to do. So that's just some images that we use, and they're able to learn a speech really quickly because of the images that we use. And now that I'm working with my brother, the images are so much more beautiful. When I was doing it, they were ugly, but now they're really, really nice. And so we just do a downward, like kind of like a no gesture. So now our minds are done. And here's a video of a boy doing it. And I'm doing a lot of word prompting with him, only because he has a bit of a speech impairment. So when he tries to speak, it's a little bit hard for him to speak. So I sometimes have to word prompt him a lot. And I like doing images because the speaking does not rely on the written word.
G. Nakoda. She's a Mohawk.
So that's just him reading off basic of speech. And in our traditions, we have a cycle of ceremonies. So 12 months out of the year, we basically give thanks to something every month. And it has to do with what is in season in that particular month. So this was, I think it was July or August. But this was our speech of the month. So it stayed up on the wall. They did this. And then we even go as far as to use construction paper. They'll take the construction paper and they'll cut out bead images and they'll stick it on there. And then on the other side, they'll stick a white piece of paper and they'll write their speech on their own paper. So now they have their own little speech. And at the end of the year, they can take it home and they can keep practicing with it. And that's their materials. So whenever they move up in a grade, or if they want to keep somebody at home a speech, then they have their own tangible little paper that they use and they take home with them. What we're doing at school. The next one is team teaching. My brother's in the orange. This was the beginning of our introduction. So to kind of get them excited about doing traditional wear, he went way above and beyond and did his cutout in full traditional regalia, and it's beautiful. And then what ended up happening was some of the kids got a little jealous and they didn't wear the theirs anymore. Well, all he did was like, he helped them and he's like, I'll help you, yours is beautiful, I love yours more than I love mine. And when he did a lot of encouraging, it just made it better. You can see on the bottom right hand or left hand, there's we hung their bodies up on the wall. So that was our first wall art, was all of us in our classroom holding hands because we are our class together. So we used our introduction story. We got our science out of it, we got our social studies, we got all kinds of things out of it just by using our body cutouts. And I always use my team teacher when I want to introduce a new conversation module. So anything that I need to ask a question, I need a reply, I start off with my brother. So just out of nowhere, I'll turn and I'll ask him a question, and he has to be prepared to answer me. And then I'll ask him another question, and he'll answer me back. So the kids are already hearing, they're already ready for me to ask a question, and he's already given them the answer. So just by us working off of each other, the students automatically know what is expected of them when we're getting ready to converse. So an example would be our introduction. So I first asked him, before we even started, I'm like, no, what's your name? And he had to tell me his name. And then I have to go, well, he's not below, what clan are you? So he had to tell me his clan. And then I have to ask, how old are you? So he had to tell me how old he was. And that's one way that you can use a team teacher just to get students ready for what you're teaching them. Our next one, these are just some images of our classroom. Every year, our school gets a little revamp and they paint the walls. And this year, with a lot of my mother's input, we came up with a design that mimics the inside of our Longhouse. So 3 of our walls are painted to look like a Longhouse, and 1 wall is painted to look like you're outside. So the bottom portion is green and the top portion is blue, so it looks like you're outside. And we have 2 little wood stoves. So where the boys are standing, they have their own wood stove, and where the girls are standing, they have their own wood stove. And we have them placed according to how you would see them at Longhouse. And we bring them out accordingly, like we have them up against the wall, but we'll also bring them out when we need to dance or do anything that involves Longhouse. So it looks like you're in the Longhouse. We have the 4 directions on here. On the east end, the men sit, and that's where the sun rises. On the west, that's where the women sit, that's where the sun sets. On the north, that's where our turtle and our wolf clans sit. And on the south side, that's where our bear clan and all the visiting clans sit. And on the south side, that's where our green and blue wall is painted. And we even went as far as to utilize our windows. We got window crayons, and because we're in the theme of fall, we started to draw the things that they're going to see outdoors during the fall time. So it's harvest, you can't really see it, but there's people holding vegetables, so they're harvesting. The medicines are drawn at the bottom of the window. It says Kawennehente Toni the fall time. The birds are getting ready to leave, so the arrow's pointing away, they're going to leave us. The animals are staying, and somewhere in there the thunders are in there too, because during the fall the thunders leave. So we utilized our window, and that's just one way to get them excited, because all I did was, I'm like, okay, we're going to draw on our windows now, and we're going to do everything related to the fall time. So they had to give me as much knowledge as they had about fall, so that we could put it on our windows. And at the bottom is our calendar. So we have the 4 seasons. The green is summer, orange is fall, blue is winter, yellow is spring. So we cut up our calendar accordingly, and then we inserted the months, and then they drew images of what ceremony is coming on during that month, and they stuck it on their calendar in the proper place. And in the bottom right-hand corner is one of our traditional legends of how food came to be for the Mohawk people. It came from the first the Sky Woman's daughter. So different vegetables grew from her body. So that's what we did right there with that image. And the faces, I needed to teach emotions, because kids have lots of different emotions. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're sad, they're mad, and they're not able to express to you. So we took paper plates, and I just drew the faces, and they had the color. So we assigned a color to every emotion. So when you're mad, you're red. When you're like ecstatic, you're like a glowing orange color. When you're happy, you're yellow. When you're jealous, you're green, or you're dark green. When you're sick, you're kind of like a light green. When you're sad, you're blue. When you're tired, you're purple, because you get kind of gray. When you're embarrassed or shy, you're pink. When you're shocked, we just gave it brown because we're like, well, we're shocked, so we just turn all of one color. When you're puzzled, you're gray, because you can't quite figure out, you're cloudy, so you can't quite figure out what's going on. And then the bottom one is he's scared, so he turned completely white because he got scared. So all we did was we used paper plates, and we did emotions. And I'll see if I can get her to do her song for you. She don't remember that she's not as enthusiastic as we are in lectures. All I did with that was I introduced song with it, and we did just a little like gesture to go along with the emotion. So we had the plates, and we had a song, we had images. So basically we went to the tune of If You're Happy and You Know It, and we just added in our emotions. So they have to say if you're happy and you know, or if you're mad and you know it, jump around, so they have to jump. And they have to say if you're excited and you know it, smile big. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're envious and you know it, cross your arms. If you're sick and you know it, cough. If you're tired and you know it, yawn. If you're if you're sad and you know it, cry. If you're tired and you know it, yawn. If you're shy and you know it, turn around. If you're surprised, then you kind you're scared, your eyes get big and you just turn white. Oh no, so that's what we said, hide if you get scared, so they just hide. But in Mohawk, it was, she tried to sing it for you, she's just a little shy. But in the classroom, they like stomp, they clap, they turn around, they run, they're just, and then it's teaching them about their emotions, but they're not really, it's not in a formal lesson, it's just a song and dance, and they think it's fun. But then you hear it outside of the classroom because they'll be telling you, oh, well, I was happy when we sang. And then their emotion came into their sentence because we had it up on our wall. And we have desks, but they're free to sit on the floor, sit at their desks, turn their desk around, move their desk out of the way, pair up with somebody, sit under a table. Basically, whatever makes them comfortable in the classroom, that's what they're able to do. And the only reason I like desks is because when you put tennis balls on them, they're easy to move around. So that was the idea behind getting the desks, was we're going to utilize as much space in our room as we can. And we have 2 chalkboards, and they're brown, so we're trying to blend it into our wall, so you don't really tell that we have chalkboards up. And then my final slide is the 4 R's of language. So it's routine, repetition, role modeling equals retention. A routine, like I said, is just something that you do on a daily basis. So for R's, first, sometimes we'll get up, and the first thing we do is we'll introduce ourselves to each other. So we do our introduction routine, and then we'll go as far as to do our song routine. So we'll start with our emotions, and it stays the same for a few months, and then when they get used to it, I just add more to their routine. We can still continue with introduction and everything like that, but I'll just expand on it and I'll make it bigger and I'll make it more relevant to what we're doing during that term. Repetition. It does not mean that you repeat a word or a sentence multiple times so that you're trying to embed it in their head. It means that on a daily basis, you're using it in multiple different ways in different contexts. So if I want them to learn the word for, my go-to word is Kawennehente, I like. So I would be like, Kawennehente no na or Kawennehente no yusadakwa or Kawennehente no na. I would give them many different ways to use Kawennehente, and pretty soon, with all you're realizing, they're going to start using the word the way you want them to, because you've used it in so many different contexts. Role modeling is you model the language the way you want to say it. Model by example. This helps the students to become proficient. At our school, we were guilty of telling the kids, we were just pointing at them and saying, speak language, speak language, speak language. And one of the things that we realized was, wow, if we're not teaching them the proper way, then they're not able to say it to us. So we switched ours to So speak the language that you know and try hard with what you do know. So we totally flipped it on them. We just said, use what you know, what you don't know will help you with. And that's our kind of like way to get them excited. And our retention. When I do a lot of gesturing, a lot of pictographs, a lot of word prompting, and my teacher works well with me, then they retain it. And I know they retain it because in grade 2, he's in grade 8 now, but when he was in grade 2, I had a little boy who we taught the 50 chiefs to, the Haudenosaunee chiefs of the 5 nations, and he could just ramble them on from start to finish. He knew everyone, he knew what nation they belonged to, he knew what gastoas they wore, he knew their clans, he knew every single name. And it was because of all the different methods we used to get them to learn it. And now in 8, he still remembers. He still has to be a little bit reminded, but for the most part, he remembers what he learned in grade 2. And it's all because of the methods that I started using when I first started teaching. And another example is at our school, we're a year-round school, so we go about 11 and a half months out of the year, almost 12 months. We go 5 weeks on, and then we get a week break, and then we'll go 5 weeks on, and we get a 2-week seasonal break. So every season we get 2 weeks off, And 5 weeks is what we noticed, like the students are already excited. By that 5th week, they're kind of lagged out. So then they get a break, quick little refresher, then they come back and they're all excited again. So we noticed that the pattern of 5-1, 5-2, 5-1, 5-2 is helping with their retention only because they don't get that lengthy 2-month break in the summer, they get 2 weeks. And even though they have to go to school during the summer, all we do is we try to find activities that incorporate the language and can be done in the summer. So if the school wants to go swimming, we'll start practicing swimming words, swimming vocabulary, swimming, anything to do with swimming, the attire, the games, and we'll focus on that, and then we'll take a whole school trip and we'll go swimming. And it's pre-K right until grade 8, and they're all there together and they're all using what they learned during that time. We can even go to the garden, we can harvest, we can go fruit picking, we can go medicine picking, anything that relates to the season we're in, we can do with them. And that's why our retention is good because of the schedule that we're on at our school. That was my last slide. I hope you enjoyed it.
Can you tell me what happens to the kids who go to school after grade 3? After 9th grade, you go on to year.
Oh, okay. We are immersion from pre-K until level 8, and that's as far as we can house. And we're working on getting a high school. In January, we'll have extended grades, but in the years past, they have to go off reservation to go to high school. So they can either choose an American or a Canadian high school because of where our reservation is located. And the majority of them go off to the American side. And what happened to me personally, and what happens to a few of them, is when they go off reservation, the first half of 9th grade, the first 6 months of school, they just think that they're the worst student in the world. Their grades are low, they're having a hard time, they just feel like they can't adjust. They're in a school where they were used to having 80 students and they're put in a new building where there's 2,000 or 3,000, so there are big adjustments that our kids have to make. But with the proper encouragement and the proper help and just all around like good talking to them, most of them after that 6-month slump, they go on and they start getting on honor roll. They'll be on either honor roll, high honor roll, or principals list. Some of them have been accepted to the National Honor Society, which is like a prestigious thing where it's actually, you are put on there because you've been on such high honors in high school that you become a National Honor Society member. So we have students from the Freedom School who, even though they totally learned the language from pre-K to grade 8, they're going on to high school, they're having a little bit of a rough start, but once they get their footing, they're right up there with everybody. And the way that we teach them is not hindering them in any way. All it's doing is they have that 6 months where they have to transition everything that they learned in the language over to English. So it makes sense that they would have a little bit of a rough time, but we do have students that just go above and beyond and they excel. I personally, I was on the National Honor Society. I got awards. I graduated 12th grade with high honors, and the school did not hinder me in any way. If anything, it actually made me the type of individual I am right now, because I was joking around with our table mates yesterday. I basically live at the school. I can have anywhere from a normal 8-hour day to sometimes a 15-hour day because of the type of school we are. The teachers or the parents have to fundraise, and every month there's some type of fundraiser. So it can be a pie sale, it can be a ticket raffle, it can be a benefit dinner. It'll be something that we have to put our time into so that our students can continue to go to school there. And when I was looking back and I counted, I've been a part of the school for about 21 years now. And now it's continuing on with my children, so I'm probably going to be there for 50, 60 years. It's basically my home. But I hope you all enjoyed it. I did my best.
sorry, we don't really have time for questions during the presentation, but there'll be lots of time during the networking this afternoon where you can get into much more detail.